How about Donald Trump?
I would ask him, do you see me as a human?
Oh.
This person is going viral right now, and it's honestly sad how much their brain appears to have been broken by radical activists. So the clip we're about to go over has gone mega viral across the internet, and it's from a segment that Stephanie Ruhle over on MSNBC did with seniors at Rutgers University in New Jersey, asking them about the 2024 election and their political preferences, and in particular, this one bit featuring a student, Rachel Toffler, who identifies as they, them, as non-binary, has gone mega viral. And when we watch it, you'll see why.
If I were to ask Vice President Harris a question, I think I would ask her, how soon do you think we can get the Equality Act passed?
How about Donald Trump?
I would ask him, do you see me as a human?
Oh. I'm sorry.
Is it possible to roll your eyes so hard you give yourself brain damage? Because that's honestly how this clip made me feel. I mean, millions of people across the internet were so touched by this and so taken aback and felt so emotional, and say they cried hearing this young person's attitude and how much they just need a hug. And I'm just like, oh my God, give me a break. You have been so brainwashed. You're just totally delulu and out of touch with reality. I'll give you more of my in-depth analysis on what happened in this clip here in a second. But first, I want to just show you how mega viral this video went on TikTok. It had nearly 14 million views and millions of likes from adoring people who were just eating up this narrative that actually, yeah, Republicans don't think LGBTQ people are real human beings or whatever. The comments section on this was just full of people eating up this narrative that somebody would have to ask in 2024, do you see me as a human, is deeply sad. Make humanity greater. Vote blue. This right here. I got you. I got you. The Equality Act will fix everyone's problems and feelings. That's number one on my list. The fact that you have to ask that question makes me cry. The fact that you stand there and make that pronouncement makes me proud. Stephanie's reaction was just as powerful. It shows how many of us feel like we are getting punched in the gut and can do nothing about it but apologize that it's happening. Actually, Stephanie Ruhle's reaction is pathetic and part of the problem. An interviewer should not affirm a delusional statement. They should probably fact check it if you're just claiming things that have no basis in reality, instead of broadcasting it on national television and then acting like your heart was just truly touched. You guys can probably hear in my voice the kind of contempt I have for this narrative, but I want to be clear, that's not necessarily contempt for this person who I'm sure is a lovely human and just seems deeply confused and appears to have been brainwashed by some pretty radical activist groups. I did some poking around about Rachel, and I found on the Rutgers website that Rachel has taken up an advocacy role, worked in LGBT rights activism, including with Senator Elizabeth Warren and with the Human Rights Campaign. Rachel is also, perhaps unsurprisingly, a student leader for the Honors College LGBTQ+ affinity group, which, guys, that's code for self-segregation among identity groups. And Rachel's ambition is to be a professional LGBT activist. I want to be working for some advocacy group as a director, as somebody who has experience in that area, Rachel said. I want to say somewhere in the human rights, working as an executive director somewhere, and then maybe in another 10 years I'll run for office. Well, Rachel, if your goal is to become a professional victim, a member of the activist class, you're off to a great start, honestly. Because this is exactly the kind of ridiculous, tiresome, emotional drivel and hyperbole that the activist groups in the LGBT community are all in on these days. And they don't really seem to care how ridiculous it is considered by most everyday Americans. Like when the Human Rights Campaign declared recently the first in their ever history since the 1980s state of emergency for LGBTQ rights, as if it's somehow worse off for LGBT rights in 2023 or 2024 than it was in 1982. So seeing as that's the general vibe of these organizations, Rachel seems like actually a great fit. But I want to talk about the substance of this clip as well. Rachel, nobody thinks you're not a human being. That's not a thing. Now, some people disagree with your identity as non-binary. They don't think there's a third sex or gender. They don't think that simply not conforming to gender stereotypes means that you aren't a man or aren't a woman. In fact, many of us find that notion inherently sexist and regressive. But just because somebody disagrees with an aspect of your identity does not mean they don't see you as human. I mean, if you have a friend who's a Christian and you aren't a Christian, you're a militant atheist, so you disagree with an important key aspect of their identity, surely you still see them as a human being. The hysteria on display here is just totally detached from facts and from reality. And it's what happens when you incentivize people culturally to be as oppressed as possible, to identify into as many victim groups as they can, because for some bizarre reason, young people online, and especially on college campuses, have turned oppression and victimhood into a form of social currency. And this is the inevitable dysfunctional result. Also, just a quick note on the whole Equality Act thing. The Equality Act is legislation that would expand the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected characteristics. It might sound innocuous enough, but it's actually really radical, sweeping legislation that redefines sex under federal law to mean whatever you feel like and undercuts existing protections in federal law for religious freedom. It also radically expands the definition of what counts as a public accommodation to the point where much smaller businesses and individual enterprises would suddenly be caught up in anti-discrimination laws that currently aren't applied to them. That could lead to many dysfunctional results. It could also result in doctors being forced to provide transition care against their conscience and against what they believe in, and a whole other host of horribles that many people disagree with in good faith, and not because they don't recognize your humanity. LGBT people are already protected in employment because of the Bostock Supreme Court decision, so that part of the Equality Act is basically just redundant at this point. Also, Rachel is from Massachusetts and went to college in New Jersey, and assuming that Rachel stays put in one of those states, the same protections as the Equality Act would enact are already in place in your state law. I've just seen no evidence that there's some epidemic of discrimination in housing or employment for LGBT people, especially considering that many states already have these protections at the state level. So why that's even a concern, plus Kamala's never going to have the votes to pass that, at least it doesn't seem likely, as we'll probably have a Republican Senate at least. But regardless, just why that's a top priority for you is not clear to me. But it's the second piece of this clip that is why it's gone truly viral and why I find it so deeply, deeply disturbing. Nobody is questioning your humanity or dehumanizing you just because they don't fully buy into a gender identity that nobody except people on Tumblr had heard of until a couple of years ago. This victim narrative is getting out of control, and activists have just brainwash so many of these young people into this state of hysteria and fear and alarmism that's just not justified by factual reality. That's not just bad for our society and for our political discourse, it's not good for them and their mental and emotional health. But sadly, it's kind of par for the course these days. What did you think of this viral clip and this interview segment more broadly? Let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it. Remember, I do take the time to read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely read it on tomorrow's show.